Greetings to my Venerable Masters, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you all today on this hazy but beautiful Sunday morning. The sun will come out. Quick review. Last time we talked about Kolita Moggallana, having experienced dissatisfactoriness or suffering of life, decided to leave home in search of spiritual liberation. We explained that the suffering that Buddhism tries to resolve is not the pain of a broken bone or a broken heart, but that of constant cycle of pain and pleasure, and the uncertainty and instability of life that keeps us in this endless wandering in the six realms called the Samsara. Today, we will talk about the second part of his journey. Moggallāna and his friends discarded the distinguishing marks. So, discarding all distinguishing marks and privileges of their caste, they enter the classless society of ascetics, monks or bhikkhu, So these are 2 points that I would like to discuss with you today. Was about the distinguishing marks that we all want to have because we are part of society, and the other is a classless society of ascetics. The caste, 种姓 or 制度 đẳng cấp, were a form of social structure in ancient India characterized by lifestyle, occupation, ritual status, and social status. Distinguishing marks such as hair, clothes, jewelries represent a cultural identity and self-identity. This strong cultural identity promotes self-esteem, self-respect, and a sense of belonging, and a healthy sense of pride. In a commercial society like the Western society, having money or wealth and things that can be brought by wealth, such as cars, houses, or fine clothing, are considered status symbols. In a society where warriors are respected, a scar on your face or on your chest represents honor and courage, which can be more valuable than money. So aside from money, the condition and appearance of one's body can be a status symbol. So not just money alone. In times past, when most workers did physical labor outdoors under the sun and had often had little food, being pale and fat was a status symbol, which indicated wealth and prosperity, because you could afford to not do any work, so you can stay inside. Now that workers usually do less physical work indoors and find little time for exercise, being tan and thin is often a status symbol in modern cultures. In fact, people nowadays will pay money to appear tan, like they did some physical work out in the sun. Some traditional societies still value obesity as a sign of prosperity. It means that one is so wealthy and has more than enough food to do manual labor, therefore one is fat. So one's big belly is a status symbol. It's transforming. In some cases, now one is trying to achieve one's social status by having less, dieting, eating healthy to reduce excess body fat is widely admired and practiced in Western society and also in some Eastern societies. Unhealthy foods are generally cheaper, but healthy and organic foods are expensive. One will need to be healthy. One will need to be wealthy in order to be able to afford a healthy lifestyle. Nowadays, health insurance has gotten so expensive. If one can afford health insurance, it's a sign of wealth, especially in retirement. Development of muscles through exercise, previously disdained as a disgrace of doing heavy manual labor and viewed as labor for the less educated and poor, is now valued as a sign of personal achievement. If people even pay fees for a personal trainer to build muscles and to stay fit. So you can see the landscape of status symbol is undergoing a notable transformation as it veers away from conventional material possessions as indicators of affluence and influence. Things have changed in the past few decades in the Western societies. Before, it was the buff, handsome football quarterbacks that were popular, and they would pick on nerds for fun. Now, it's the opposite. It's those quarterbacks who are working for the nerds who are ruling the world with their technologies, such as Bill Gates. Recently, there's been a shift in trends. Mega celebrities, such as Taylor Swift, are advocating sustainability to save the planet, while billionaires like Elon Musk are letting go of their expensive homes. It involves prioritizing meaning of life over materiality and building distinctive pathways to differentiation to form their own identity. If people nowadays were to be like Moggallāna and to give up their homes, cut their hair and beards, it would not be the same as discarding all distinguishing marks and entering the classless society of ascetics. Because they're only leaving an existing identity to form a new one. It's still about the ego. So this is not a criticism, by the way. These individuals are more courageous and creative than we are. So I just want to point out that things have changed, but even though things have changed, it hasn't really changed much. So are there any comments or questions? Okay. We're talking about identity because that's what we have in common. Whether one is poor or rich, a man or woman, American or Asian, lay or monastic, as long as one has not achieved enlightenment, one is always looking for someone or something with which to identify oneself. So here's a question. Why should we need to identify ourselves with something external? We can say that successful people in this world, be they entrepreneurs, scientists, etc., have one thing in common. They have a strong sense of commitment to their work. And their work is their identity. So we can say successful people have a strong sense of self-identity, meaning they know who they are and they know what they want. There's no doubt about it. Of course, the word success can have different meanings for different people. Some people view achieving a certain amount of money in their bank account is a success. Some people view raising a family, a successful, harmonious family, or obtaining a certain executive title in a company is a success, or a commitment to their religious belief is a success. We can conclude that having a strong sense of self-identity is important if one wants to function well in society. Let me elaborate on this a little bit more as to why self-identity is important. According to an article in the Psychology Today magazine by Susan Whitmore, a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, as you grow up, you will face crucial events in your life, such as adulthood, a death in the family, marriage, divorce, etc. If you don't come to grips with crucial life decisions according to the article, such as your roles in society, including your careers, values, and gender role, and you never arrive at a firm identity, say it's identity doubt or confusion, will not prepare you for the developmental tasks that lie ahead, meaning that as you grow older, it will only get harder if you don't have a strong sense of identity. A strong identity emerges not only from this conscious determination of your life's purpose, but also successful overcoming issues during adulthood. So raising a child, helping a child to overcome difficulties, helps to prepare for what's lying ahead when that child enters adulthood. But not only that, the issues of adulthood can reemerge later in life as well. People may confront problems in their connection to work in their adult years if they feel they're in a dead-end job, or a divorce could throw their life upside down. So friends, when a child, a friend moving away or a friend leaving them could make them feel hopeless, make them feel sad or even depressed. But then later in life, when they face a divorce, for example, like that problem could reemerge, could make them feel hopeless. This can lead to midlife crisis, where they feel they have lost the meaning of their life, and they feel sad and start to lose interest in life. So for our happiness and well-being, it's very important to have a strong sense of self-identification, a strong sense of commitment to life's purpose. And of course, it has to be ethical and positive. According to the article, it is difficult to establish true intimacy and commitment to your purpose if your identity is weak, meaning you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want. It is very difficult to make a commitment to your purpose. The problem is that as one gets older and the longer one waits to make a commitment, the emotional confusion will only get worse. Constantly remaining in indecision, not making a commitment, can also be detrimental in different ways, where they will go through emotional ups and downs, which will lead to ever more confusion and indecision. On the other hand, people who continually evaluate their commitments and make adjustments to achieve greater realization of their identities or true identities are most likely to achieve fulfillment throughout their lives. From the worldly perspective, it is a very good thing to have a strong sense of self-identity. But from the Buddhist perspective, this is not enough to be truly happy. So we want to take what we have achieved in the world and take it to the next level. In other words, if you want to remain in the cycle of life and death, then self-identity may be helpful. But if you want to gain enlightenment from a Buddhist perspective, having a strong sense of self-identity is going to be a big problem. So we will have to go beyond our self-identity. Kolita Moggallana, Mu already had a strong sense of commitment to his search for spiritual liberation. Let me share a story with you to illustrate my point, why self-identity is a double-edged sword that can help you and hurt you at the same time. One day, a Brahmin named Dana was so awed with the Buddha's glorious appearance. He wanted to know who this person was, so he asked the Buddha, "Venerable, are you a deva," meaning a heaven being, a Gandhava, meaning like a musician god, a Yaka, which was like an evil spirit, or a human being? Every time he asked the Buddha a question, the Buddha said, "No, I'm not a deva, I'm not a Gandhava, I'm not a Yaka, and I'm not a human being." But the Buddha replies, as you can see here, "Those are abandoned by me," meaning these beings, their root destroyed, deprived of the conditions of development, not destined for future arising. Just like a red, blue, or white lotus, born in the water, grown in the water, rising up above the water, stands unsmeared by the water. In the same way, I, born in the world, grow in the world, having overcome the world, live unsmeared by the world. Remember me, Brahman, as awakened." So the Buddha was neither a deva. And although he looked like he was glorious, like a deva, like a heavenly being, like some god, but he said, no, I'm not a god. And so Dana said, well, are you a human being? Because you look like a human being. And the Buddha says, no, I'm not a human being. So what the Buddha was saying was that he was free from all this, free from all conditioning or karma, 业力, nghiệp lực. So there was nothing to cause him to be reborn as a god or even a human being. For example, a good person is defined as someone who helps others, whereas a bad person is someone who hurts others. So when we look at somebody who helps other people, we say, this is a good person. Or somebody who steals from another person, we say, this is a bad person. So we label them. Or an animal is defined as ignorance of good and bad and savagery towards others, where they can even kill or hurt or eat their own family members. So a person who acts with cruelty, we say that person acts like an animal. Or a god is defined by their karma of the 10 good conducts. So as long as we are not enlightened, we continue to be defined by our own karma, our habitual likes and dislikes. And that's why we are reborn as a deva or a musician god or a human being, because we have those karmic tendencies. We like to do certain things. So doing good things, helping people is relatively good, but it's not pure because there's still an egoistic drive to do good things. And so we do because it satisfies our ego. And therefore, when we create that habit, that karma, then we are moving ourselves towards a certain realm, right? We like to associate ourselves with a certain type of people. And that is defining ourselves. Our karma is defining us essentially. But the Buddha had destroyed his ego. He was no longer definable by his karma. His deeds had no egoistic patterns. 我执, his body may appear to be that of a man, but his mind, his consciousness was unconditioned. 无为, vô vi. And therefore he was a Buddha, an enlightened being. He could not be defined by karma. He could not be defined by a heavenly karma or humanly karma. He was none of those. He was undefinable because he was pure. As a Buddha, he was a personification, 变化身, 腾biến hóa, so to speak, of the unconditioned mind. But unconditioned mind here is that there's nothing that he came from something specific, but due to conditions that he appeared. But he came from the unconditioned. Does it make sense? He came from nothing really, but due to conditions that due to his vows, due to the conditions that the sentient beings need him, that he transformed himself into a Buddha. Or, I mean, we can't even say himself because we're defining a male figure, but he's not a male figure. He's not a female figure. He is unconditioned, undefinable. What Dana tried to do is what we all try to do when we meet something new. We try to describe the unknown in terms of the known so that the mind can accept what it is seeing. There always seems to be a basic tendency to want to put people in categories and think that we got them all figured out. This creates stereotypes, biases, and discrimination. One reason for this is that people try to function in society, so it's understandable. They want to know where they fit relative to others around them. So it's understandable that we're always trying to figure out who we are and who they are so that where we fit. In the Western societies, we want to know what sort of job, they want to know what sort of job we got, and perhaps from that they try to figure out our income. They want to know where you were born, where you were educated, where you live now. And by taking all these various sociological readings, they gradually narrow down the field and think they got you nicely pinned down. So completely, they think they understand you completely. I mean, this way it helps them to treat you or accommodate you as appropriate. So it's understandable why people do that. So identity is good socially, as it helps people to know how to function and to live a happy life in a way. The problem is that your consciousness forms an egoistic pattern and becomes bound in the samsara, 轮回, in the endless cycle of life and death. As we have discussed at great length last time, as long as you're stuck in the samsara, you are subject to instability or impermanence, where you will constantly experience the ups and downs of worldly joy and pain. This is why Moggallāna discarded his worldly identity that bound him to instability and dissatisfactoriness, ko. In so doing, he was making a transition from the worldly identity to spiritual enlightenment. This transition, however, is not easy, and because it requires you to abandon your worldly self-identity. Without your identity, you can be at risk of mental confusion and insecurity. So then, if we want to make the transition, what are we supposed to do? What can help us to make the transitions from the mundane world to the ideal spiritual world of enlightenment? Any comments? Fortunately, there is a bridge to help us make that connection. And that bridge is the spiritual community, 身团当đoàn. The spiritual community serves as a common ground between the two worlds. How does this transition take place? Well, first, one feels dissatisfied about the world, about the surrounding, and one starts to look for change, just like Moggallāna. This dissatisfactoriness is a very positive one. One then starts to look for meaning in life. Then one tries out meditation, Buddhist studies, one starts to listen to Buddhist lectures and applies the Buddhist principles in one's life. Then change starts from there. As one sees the benefits and meaning of in one's life, one becomes more committed to want to maximize the benefits, the results. So it is dissatisfactoriness, ko, that motivates one to find something better. How does one know that it is a spiritual community and not some spiritual group that can eventually ruin one's resolve for enlightenment? It is important to differentiate between a spiritual community and a group of people who just have the same interests. Otherwise, we can come and sit in meditation or attend puja, Dharma assemblies, 法會, or Dharma lectures weekly or twice a month, and we may feel good about it, but then we just get back to the world in the same old way, the same old habit. So we haven't really changed. So we invested a lot of time attending those activities, but we ourselves have found no satisfaction because we have not changed. We have not grown spiritually. So we want to be able to differentiate between a spiritual community that can help us to develop and a group that is just fun to be, but then it leads us to nowhere. Because if we are part of a group, nothing of our consciousness has transformed. Our afflictions of greed, anger, and delusion still remain the same or may get even worse. Because you go there and you have jealousy, you fight about things that are really have nothing to do with development, but you're so wrapped up in it because it just agitates you, and it continues to wrap you even more, and you essentially lose your sight of your goal. So we don't want to be leaving the world, the worldly identity behind, just to find ourselves attached to an identity of another group, essentially. Does it make sense? Right? I'm going to introduce some new terms in order to explain this idea a little bit. Individual versus unit of mass, and spiritual community versus group. In order to be able to transform our consciousness towards the directions of enlightenment, we need to become individuals with a capital I, and not just units in a mass or a group, meaning that an individual, I suppose, is one who has awareness, who is responsible for his or her development, and who is moving towards directions of enlightenment, as opposed to a unit in a mass, which is part of a group, and you just get told what to do. In order to find support of that transformation, we should be part of a spiritual community and not a group. So that's what I mean by spiritual community, who is someone who has self-awareness, right, through some form of training, not in an egoistic sense. That's why I say capital I. I want to differentiate an individual as opposed to a person who is individualistic, who is very egoistic. 我执, and on that basis, that one develops confidence and self-respect that does not depend upon conventions or current fashion. So you are truly who you are. You truly know what you want, and not because you're following a trend, something that's popular and that you want to be part of it. If you are a true individual, your sense of identity and purpose in life does not rely on your social identity. Whether you are a citizen, family member, worker, a rebel, or an iconoclast, you are not defined by what's currently popular. If you feel proud or ashamed of who you are because of your affiliation with an organization, then you are not truly individuals. Right? You're proud because of an organization, or you're not an individual because you have not defined who you are and what you really want. The organization may truly be a spiritual community, but it doesn't mean that we ourselves are individuals if we don't know who we are, we don't know what we want. The people around us are very good, very helpful, but we depend on them emotionally, spiritually, but we can't stand on our own feet. Then we are not truly individuals. If we are truly individuals, then wherever we go, there's the spiritual community. So it requires of us first to be individuals. Then we can recognize the spiritual community. As a mature human being, your self-awareness transcends human social groups of all kinds. So we can see from the above story about the Buddha and Dana that the Buddha is the most mature being because he is not defined by a heavenly karmic pattern or a heavenly karmic pattern, but he is undefinable. Not that because he has nothing, but because it's beyond definition. So from there, that we can say he is the most mature because he is the most individual. If you are a true individual, you see reality clearly and can stand on your own feet, and at the same time maintain a harmony with the way things really are. For example, the great Tibetan guru, Milarepa, he was an individual in the true sense because he was free of the power of social conventions. He practiced the way that he liked. He did not conform for the sake of it, but he practiced that whatever that was necessary to lead him towards enlightenment. He did not need to conform to other people's expectation of how a spiritual practitioner should look. It did not matter to him how he was seen. Often he just had some piece of cloth covering him, and people thought that he was a beggar. In fact, his own sister, looking at him, thought that he was a beggar when other people revere him. So you can see and he didn't care whether people revere him as a guru, as an enlightened being, or a beggar. It did not matter to him because he was truly an individual. Does it make sense? So if we are truly individuals, we would be very comfortable in our own skin, right? Not because somebody compliments us that we feel happy, or somebody who disrespects us that we get upset. But we understand our value. If you are truly individual, if you are truly an individual, you understand your own value. We tend to be most ashamed of matters over which we have no control, like our social background or what we look like. Milarepa, by contrast, was ashamed only of sinful, evil, and meaningless deeds. That was all that he was concerned about, was how to avoid evil deeds, unskillful deeds, and not because he did not have clothes, or he did not have a big monastery to live in, that he was ashamed. He lived in the mountains, but to him, it was natural way of being that he was only concerned about making mistakes, make spiritual mistakes. That would take him further away from enlightenment. So we have just explained the ideal individual. Opposite of that, a non-individual is just a unit in a mass, a part of a group, who has no self-awareness and relies on others to tell him who he is and what he wants. Right? You just follow the crowd. So you're not an individual, you're just following the crowd. He may be in a spiritual community, but he doesn't get the true benefits from the spiritual community. So here's a question. How do you tell if the organization you're part of is a spiritual community or just a group? Spiritual community is, by definition, positive, skillful, and good. By group, I don't suggest that it's bad or evil. A group can be a good group. It can still consist of good people, such as a company that treats their employees well, who work hard to grow the company. But it's just a group because the company is not a spiritual community. It does not support the development of one's consciousness towards enlightenment and spiritual liberation from suffering. Right? They are together. They have a common goal. The company treats the employees very well, but it's not a spiritual community. It's just a group. The group needs to have authority and power in order to function effectively, as shown in the picture on the right-hand side. So you have group people here, but they're really units in a mass because they follow whatever the company's directions, right? And then you have leaders and at the top. And so you can see that more people have less power or no power, and you go up, then you have more power and authority. So the power and authority resides at the top. Yes?
You said that but you just saying a community, a group, they have to have people to guide. What if nowadays, for example, in Taiwan or in China that I know, a big company, they have a spiritual group as well. For example, they're leading their employees first to go bow to the Buddha, and then they recite 10 precepts or 5 precepts, or sometimes they recite another.
Yeah.
The guy to be
proper conduct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would that consider as spiritual community or still consider as group?
Okay. Yep. Great question. So by spiritual community, I don't mean like a church. I don't mean like a building of a church and some people that are doing the ceremonies. But a spiritual community is any organization that helps the participants to develop their consciousness, to overcome greed, anger, and delusion, and to work themselves towards enlightenment. So yes, a company can be a spiritual community if they are working not for profit, for personal profit, but to help develop. So it can be a model, but it's very limited because if the company is owned by stockholders, then you have to make a profit. Unless that company is so fortunate to be able to stand on their own and they don't need to worry about making a profit. But a company that does not make a profit will not last long unless you have a very big account. So if that company is doing something for people to build a product, I'm not sure if they can be called a spiritual community because they're in business to do business. But if their intention is to help their employees to grow, to expand their consciousness, by consciousness I mean when you sit in meditation, you are increasing your consciousness to a higher level, meaning you have more awareness of yourself and others. And if you are operating at a lower level of consciousness, you are very reactive. People agitate you, you get angry. You don't know why you get angry sometimes, but you just react. So that's like a low level of consciousness. But through cultivation, 修行, tu hành, you are expanding you're raising your level of consciousness, meaning you don't react anymore, but you are being creative. It's not that you are not responding. You're not like a dead piece of wood, but you still are very alive, but you are not reactive. You are creative, right? So a company, a group, that helps you to grow. That helps you grow creative. I'm not, when I say creative, I don't mean like creative of creating technology or in that way, but creative in terms of self-development. You have more awareness, right? You have more awareness. You have reduced your afflictions, your worries, greed, anger, delusion. So it depends. To answer Master's question, I would say it depends on the intention of that organization. It may be on the surface that they want their employees to every day recite the precepts and whatnot so that everybody can work together harmoniously. But this is very difficult if you are a secularized organization to be practicing something that's kind of religious, because it's not commonly acceptable, because especially a company that is being owned by stockholders, that they expect you to produce a profit. Like I said, unless that organization has a backing of somebody who has a very deep pocket that does not care about making a profit. And if they can make a profit, they can last. If not, then it will be very difficult to maintain. I really have some comments.
Good comment. I've heard and read, some companies who practice this, and the way the spiritual community in the company and the CEO that lead by example, and then practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to worry about making profit.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I think like the company who is more inclusive, who treats their employees well, tend to outperform those who don't. So yes, I agree with that statement. Yeah. Yeah. But the underlining is that in order for a company to be sustainable, it needs to make a profit. At the beginning, at your startup, you can afford to have losses. But at some point, you got to start making profit in order to be sustainable. So.
She making profit for her company.
Yeah.
Keep it expanding to different countries. And by following Master Ching Kong, by teaching people, their her employees, in believing Dharma,
Yeah.
believing in something. related to Buddhism. And then she'd been doing it the first time when we met her back in 2001. Back in a long time, we went to give her the purification for her community. And starting that point, she kept following Master Qigong and her community keep growing. So it's not because her own company does not make any profit. She is making profit, and she owns her own company and keep expanding. Not only that, now another teacher also in Taiwan, but he's now opened a company in China, and his company is growing too. Okay, he's teaching how to become a good person in 7 days, and he succeed in that program. So he bring that to his company and to teach his employees. So it's growing. So I understand that you're saying that depend on if they have stockholders or big companies, they have different point of views. But there's a group of people of doing that, and there's so many outside in the world they're doing that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean I'm trying to define a spiritual community. Doesn't mean a building anything physical, but as long as that organization supports the individuals, and it has to be individuals because you can't just have a person who just comes in, participates, and then leave and not knowing why they're doing that. But that person has to be an individual, and the spiritual community can help him or her to develop. Then it could be anybody, it could be any organization, right? But I think in Taiwan or in China, where people have similar values, cultural value, then it's very easy for them to accept. But if like in America, like in Western society, if you were to incorporate a religious belief in your mission statement, the many people who don't have, who cannot resonate with the values will not be able to accept. And so, especially we're in a melting pot society, it's very difficult to have people to follow that way because they may say, hey, that's not my value, that's not my religious belief, and they may not be able to resonate with it. So it takes an organization of people who have the same values, same belief to follow the path, right? So I think the challenge to have that kind of model in this country is very challenging, especially people claim their individual rights, right? They don't want to be forced to believe in any way. The CEO may flow down certain, for example, during COVID, where the CEO thought that it was the right thing to do to make people to wear masks. There were people who protested and say, why are you telling me what to do? Don't tell me how to live my life. So even a simple thing like that, people would challenge. So that's why I think in America, it's very difficult to have people to say, we're going to follow one teaching, and this is our model. Of course, it's not impossible. I think it's more difficult here than in Taiwan, where generally it's generally a lot of percentage of people are Buddhist. So it's very easy to find talent who can resonate with that. But I agreed, and studies have shown, and that's why the company that I was part of, they wanted to promote inclusiveness, engagement employees, because studies have shown that those companies who are diversified in gender at the top, their executive leadership, outperform those who are not as diversified. Right? So it's a fact that the more you are diversified at the top, you have more opinions, you have more feedback, therefore you have a wider outlook of the market conditions, and you can make more informed decisions. Therefore, you can reduce your risk, meaning reduce your loss, right? So research has shown that is the case, that companies who treat their employees well or tend to profit. But there are also CEOs who say, I like how I run my company. I don't care about research. This is my company. This is how I run the company. But then they say, I don't care if I'm missing out or what. So there are people who are egoistic, you may say, but there are people who like to do what they like to do, right? Yeah, so very good discussions. I think it's definitely, I think people will start to pay attention more of this because the market has become more globalized, where everybody knows about everybody else essentially because the information is out there. Companies who want to survive will need to conform because people know what's going on about other companies, how other company treats their employees. So they know the pay span, the pay range. They know the compensation. They share. You go onto LinkedIn, you go into other social media platforms. You can get all kinds of information. So those at the top know employees know. So they have to conform, otherwise they will lose the talent they need to perform well. So it's going to be very interesting how companies share and respond to those challenges, those requests, because people are no fools anymore, right? So appreciate the discussion. Yes.
So in my view, especially the Buddhist when we talk about Samsara, spiritual community, we talk about community, an organization that promotes the Dharma teaching. So in that way, in the Buddhist sense, is raise awareness spiritually, following the doctrines that are taught. So correspondingly, to apply that to other religions, the spiritual community could be the teaching of the Dharma in a different religious sense, promote spiritual awareness, as well as spiritual growth. For as long as that is the goal of the organization, would that then be qualified as a spiritual community?
So you're saying other religions promote something similar, so those considered as spiritual communities. I think spiritual communities from their perspective, because in terms for Buddhism, our goal is to achieve enlightenment, to become Buddhas, and to help others to become Buddhas. Yeah. I guess you can say yes, they can be spiritual communities from their perspective, from their goals, right? But the definition that I'm using, spiritual community, is anything that helps you to expand your consciousness, to have more awareness, so that you are no longer just being reactive to things, to follow your karmic patterns, to continue to create that pattern, but to be liberated from that cycle. And the only way we can do that is to have awareness, to stop creating karma that thickens that cycle, so it can be a spiritual community from their perspective, but for what we're discussing here from Buddhist perspective is any organization that helps you to develop, spiritually, to expand your consciousness and be more creative and not reactive. Does it make sense? Yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments? I appreciate the discussion. It's always good to have feedback. It's like I learned something new, right? To get other people's feedback. Okay. Okay. So we talked about the one difference between spiritual community and just a group is that the group depends on power and authority in order to function effectively. The group needs to have authority and power, so this way orders can be carried out, policies can be implemented. And authority is created by the group for a position of power. The person in the position of power represents the group, like a CEO or the president of a country or king of a country. That person actually has no power of his own, but it is the power created by the group. Therefore, he's representing the group. So he has no power, but the power creates this group creates power, and because he's a representative of that group, therefore he has the power. Just like our president, Joe Biden, he is a citizen of the country, but because he is in a position of power as the president of the American people, he now has the power to create laws. He can exercise his power to create laws on behalf of the American people. So when we are dealing with authority, that person in power representing the group, then we are not dealing with the individual in terms of a spiritual friendship. In a spiritual community, there is no authority. In a spiritual friendship, there is no authority, except when we are dealing with those in a spiritual community who are not true individuals. A spiritual community can be run by those who are not individuals, who are take part in running, help to run the organization. So as mentioned before, the spiritual community is a bridge between the mundane, 世间, thể yang, and the transcendental, 出世间, 宿thể yang. Therefore, there will be a mixture of individuals and non-individuals. So, but anytime that a person in that group exercises authority, then that person is not an individual, or treating some other people in an authoritative way, then when they're exercising their power, then they are not individuals. They are not in a spiritual community. Does that make sense? Anyone who's interested with power derived from his position is not an individual. He's only exercising the power given to him by the organization, not of his own. He has no power, but because he's the representative, he's the leader of that organization, therefore he has the power to push people around, to influence people. So what do we mean by power? The definition of power is the ability or the capacity to act. It also means the ability to force, to sway, or to influence others. Ability to act physically and emotionally. In this case, we are more concerned of the ability to control and to influence and destroy other people. The group provides a person with a position of authority to exercise his power on behalf of the group. So in doing so, he's representing the group, just like the US president representing us, the American people. Since power has no place in the spiritual community, there is no representing either. Does it make sense? In other words, power in terms of the ability to coerce, to force other people, has no place in the spiritual community. This is not to say that power is wrong. It has its place, but it does not belong in the spiritual community. Power has its place within the group. Group members are related by power. It is about influencing and controlling others. Right? You have the CEO flowing down his policies to his executive team, and the executive team flows the same policy down to their directors to implement, and then eventually down to the employee. So it's about representing and influencing and changing and controlling other people. And that is needed in order for a group to be effective. Does it make sense? So it's not wrong. Power and authority in the group go hand in hand. Power is necessary in the group. It's what defines the group. Such as in politics, whoever has the political power can control those who don't. Without power, the group does not exist. Similarly, if power is used in the spiritual community to coerce, to force somebody, then that somebody is not being treated as an individual, but just a unit in a mass. Does it make sense? Right? An individual is one who is positive, who has self-awareness, and who takes responsibility for his or her own development. Like a non-individual is one who is told by others what to do or what to be. A group is governed by power structure. It creates authority and power. which are given to a person to represent the group. So here's a question. If power is the principle that governs the group, what then is the principle that governs the spiritual community? Any comments? Any guesses? Yes.
To respect and support the enlightenment of each member?
Yes. Yes, you can probably say to respect and to support the members to reach the enlightenment. So a spiritual community, I'll say it in a different way, spiritual community is governed by the principles of loving kindness. Essentially what you're saying, respect, love, and support. In the case of power, power can be represented or delegated. You can exercise somebody else's power to force somebody else to do something. Just like the CEO flowing his policies to the executive team, and the executive team members say, I am a VP of the company. I'm going to take the power given to me by my CEO, our CEO, to implement the policy. Therefore, you need to listen, right? Or the president can send his ambassadors or secretary of state to go to another country to speak on behalf of him. So the secretary of state can negotiate on behalf of the president because he has this power given to him by the president that the American people had created this position for that the president. Yes.
You say that spiritual communities have no power, no representing others. But if in a temple is a sangha, is a master, and then the master in the temple say no killing, no stealing, no the 5 precepts, the lay person has to follow. So that will be considered no power or representing others? Or how does it work?
That doesn't mean there's no order, right? There is order, but the person, the disciple who takes that teaching, no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no intoxication, no lying, no intoxication, yeah. Then he is an individual because he follows that because he knows a good thing to do for him. But he doesn't just blindly follow. Oh, no killing? Okay, no killing. He understands why he's doing that. As opposed to the master saying, you are not supposed to do this. You don't eat this. You sit here, sometimes you say, my master say, you sit here, you sit there for training. But he has no intention to control his student, his disciple. If he has the intention to control every aspect to control that disciples emotionally, spiritually, to abuse, then that's a power structure. That's not a spiritual community. So I will elaborate on that in a little bit. So we can say that in the group, you can use somebody else's power to force somebody else to do something. But can you take somebody else's loving kindness and pass it on to other people? The answer is no. Other people can train you to love, to respect, but you cannot, and you can take what you learn and show respect to others, but you cannot take the first person's loving kindness and pass it on to a third person. You yourself will have to show that third person loving kindness. Does it make sense? That you don't take, my teacher's loving kindness, but I'm gonna beat you down, because here's my teacher's loving kindness. And the third person will not be able to receive that loving kindness because, as opposed to the group where say, this is the order from my leader or our leader, and you do this, then they go do that. You can do that. But if the master is teaching the disciples loving kindness, in order for somebody else to receive that loving kindness, interacting with the disciple would have to treat that person with loving kindness. You cannot just pass through, just like power through delegation. Just like the ambassador does not need to become the president in order to negotiate, but he can be delegated. Does it make sense? Yeah.
It's kind of like you were saying, in order to share that, to know power, no representing others, but in order to practice loving kindness,
Yeah.
you have to do the work yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. So that's the one big difference between group and spiritual community. A spiritual community, you don't use power, but you can still get work done because they are individuals. They know how to do the right things. Whereas a power, the units in a mass might not know how to do the right thing. They just follow. They don't know what they're doing. They just follow. Even if they know what they're doing, they may not agree, but they just follow because it's their job. If you are being passive, you're not being creative, then you're not being individuals. Any comments from the master?
You say sometimes that if the master gives instructions, it has to come with the kindness. But sometimes the kindness has to have with the wisdom. A lot of times you see the problems, maybe at your level, or different people at the level, they don't see that, well, how come my master is not kind? But in his level, he see that beyond the kindness, it has wisdom. And then there's a lot of time masters you cannot do that. And I order you not to do it. And you go like, Master, you don't have any feelings. No. So it has to be, depends on the situations. That's why we have spiritual community. Of course, we don't have no power, but a lot of time, the master or the people who are in charge of the temple, you can see picture very far. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times they say, no, you cannot do that. It means a little bit of power. It's mean. They mean don't do it. It mean don't do it. But they have the under meaning inside. So we have to follow. We have practice. First, we follow. And then we really realize, the master has this meaning. And then eventually you understand, oh, look later, I did not do that. I follow my master instruction. Otherwise, I get something else.
Right. So when I say power in a spiritual community, I mean, when I say power in a group, and then I say no power in spiritual community, I don't mean there is no order. What we're talking about is order, right? So when I say power in a group, what I mean is that a person with the power to influence and to force others in a religious group, the leader has the ability to, the power to destroy somebody else emotionally or spiritually. But if that leader can help that person to develop, then it's not a group, but a spiritual community. So the master of the leader of that organization can be an individual of a spiritual community. And as long as he is not abusing his power, but he's using his wisdom, knowledge, he on external, he may seem like exercising his authority, but because the disciple is not an individual yet, so you have to use in a way to train the disciples. But the disciple has to be willing to become an individual, meaning that he has to understand, or she has to understand what the training is. But if that person is just following and not thinking, and hoping someday he will rise through the ranks to become a leader, then he's not expanding his consciousness. Therefore, he's not an individual. Does it make sense? I'm just using the meaning here and not anything physical. Just because you have a group of monks, it doesn't mean that is a spiritual community. But you have a group of people doesn't mean that it's not a spiritual community, lay people. If that organization supports the development of the consciousness, and there is nobody abusing the power, the authority, because the master is not, that group creates a position of master not because of people creating a position, but people respect that person, say, please teach us. That position is not created by power, by authority. Does it make sense? But that person, that position of a master is created because people need guidance. That's different from the position of authority and power, where that group creates that position in order to function effectively. Whereas a spiritual community, that position of authority is created because then they want guidance, they want order. Does it make sense? Yeah. So when I say, when the master says that, the master is exercising his authority to train, that may be proper because that disciple is not an individual yet. That person has, that disciple does not have awareness yet, does not have the training yet. And so it's through the process. So sometimes you have to use, harsh words in order to train the disciples. Yes. Yes.
If you don't mind, if I share
yes.
a short story. Yeah. This story made people would think that the master, the way how he's treated, was not nice. Back in the time in 2 years ago when I was in Vietnam, and there was a mental kid. He was 19, but he was sent to the temple because his parents wanted to take care of him. So he went to the temple. He looked around and to see whatever the stuff that he could take and he put it in his pocket. And he pretended that he did not know anything. And then eventually, after a couple of months, people noticed things would disappear, especially money. So they keep watching him. At first, there was, how my money is disappeared. And then they started to look around and they saw that. And they shared with the master. The master said, no, it cannot be. The master showed kindness to him. Let him stay here. Because at this, every day he listened to Dharma's talk, he listened to Buddha's chanting names will help him to awake. So it was kindness. And then he let stay another month and continue money. This keep going, disappear. And then eventually the master had to call him and said, you have to give him more. You cannot let him in. The reason why he sent it to him, people criticize him. I thought he was so kind. Now you took him out to send him home. And he said, because the stuff belongs to the temple, is 10 directions of the service. If he took the sample stuff, he had to go to the
hell
forever. So it took a lot of time. So in the term to protect him, to send him home, he do whatever. If he take the money from another person, he only owes that person. But then if he take the stuff from the temple, he overtake so many people. So people look at the pictures. This man so rude, so mean, but he had his knowledge, and he has his wisdom to help this kid. This is my story.
Yeah. Yeah. So we cannot just judge somebody's actions. It could be a spiritual community, or it could be a group, or it could be teachings or exercising of authority or power, right? Yeah. So don't jump to conclusion. Okay. So power can be delegated. Loving kindness cannot be delegated. You can exercise somebody else's power, but you cannot exercise somebody else's loving kindness. So having realized the fruitlessness of the worldly enjoyment, Moggallāna is making the transitions from the world to the spirituality in search of the truth. by discarding all distinguishing marks and privileges of his caste and entering the classless society of ascetics. He wants to search for spiritual liberations and be free from the power of social conventions and karmic conditioning. Similarly, when we realize the absolute bliss does not exist in the samsara, the cycle of life and death, we are motivated to search for something better, so to speak. So we become individuals with a capital I, not being egoistic, right? We are self-aware without being egoistic, positive and responsible for our own development, without relying on others to tell us who we are and what we want. So we take part in the spiritual community as a bridge to help us make that transition from the mundane to the transcendental. We recognize that the spiritual community is different from the group, which is governed by power and authority. The spiritual community is governed by loving kindness that supports our spiritual development of the consciousness to higher levels. Does it make sense so far? So individuals versus units in the mass, spiritual community versus group. Moggallāna and his friends left the world behind their worldly homes and started upon their quest for inner peace and salvation, 解脱, 解脱. At that time, there were many teachers with different views. Some of them taught amoralism, which denies any reward or punishment for either good or bad deeds. Others taught fatalism, which teaches that we are powerless, suffering is predestined. And others taught materialism, which says just enjoy while you can. With death, it is all annihilated. There's nothing left. So both friends realized the hollowness of such teachings early enough and thus did not take them too seriously. In the city of Jagaha, there, however, was one teacher who appealed to them. His name was Sanjaya Bella Taputa, who, according to tradition, was identical with the Sanjaya Bella Taputa mentioned in the Pali Canon, one of the 6 non-Buddhist teachers. Sanjaya was different from other ascetics teachers. He posed what we may call the deepest existential problems. For example, firstly, the question is there another world beyond our empirical surface experience? In other words, is there another world beyond this physical world? Secondly, after the death of this material body, does one appear in the world the way of a purely mental rebirth process as a spontaneously arising being? 化生, 化生, you transform after this death into another world. Thirdly, whatever action one had committed to this carnal existence, this physical existence, be it good or bad, will it take place, will it have an effect in the next life as a reward or punishment, thus constituting our destiny? And then fourthly, what finally is the destiny of a perfected one, in other words, the Buddha, after death? In which way is it possible to conceive and describe his state of condition, 境界, 感觉? So these were questions that people, teachers at that time debated. But Sanjaya took a different approach because generally there were 4 types of answer to these questions, either yes or no, or both yes and no, or neither yes nor no. Sanjaya was clever. He took a different approach and thought the real answer was none of those 4, and that one should refrain from any judgment about these problems. In other words, don't jump to a conclusion. While other ascetic teachers advocated one of those 4 answers as a solution, Sanjaya did not commit himself to any of them. While this may sound like the right answer, the right thing to do, but in reality, it was only hiding his own confusion. He didn't commit to any one of them. the Indian king Ajatasattu, Ashur Shuwang, Asatevung, having talked to many ascetic teachers at that time, concluded that Sanjaya was the most confused and stupid of them all. The story behind that was that the comment was when the king asked Sanjaya about the benefits of being a monk and an ascetic. Samsara, in a sense, responded with very confusing answers, which the king thought was a non-answer kind of answer. In other words, he was just evading the question. 逃避, sự tránh né. But Kolita Moggallana and Apasitisa Sarupatra, who at the time had not found any teachers better than Sanjaya, and they were attracted to Sanjaya's, his different position. They must have felt that his philosophical stance was something more than mere evasion. 逃避, sự tránh né. But yet, after a short time, they realized that Sanjaya did not know what they were searching for, which was a cure for the illness of universal suffering. They later realized that Sanjaya's philosophical stance was actually an avoidance and of skepticism, 怀疑, 怀疑. So this is taking me to my second part of the lecture, doubt, skepticism. That has a more of serious side effect. The kind of doubt that I'm talking about is not that you are unsure about something due to lack of information. If the kind of doubt that is intellectual because you don't know anything about it, then it can be resolved by studying under a master or thinking through things for yourself. The kind of doubt that I want to discuss is not purely intellectual, but it's a negative mental event. It's more like indecision. It's an emotional inability to make up one's mind one way or the other. And this is what was going on with Sanjaya. The Sanskrit word is vicikitsa. It is said that when one is indecisive, one is in two minds about what is good or right. And one can't take a position, therefore one is stuck. With regard to what one knows about the Dharma or the truth, one cannot make a commitment to go with it. One can't seem to make a decision about spiritual liberation. One understands that the cycle of life and death cannot offer absolute and unconditioned joy, but yet one can't let go of the worldly mundane joy. One reason is if one makes up one's mind to commit to spiritual liberation, which is a positive thing, one will be facing the discomfort and even pain in that transition and letting go of attachments to the world. So, question, why would anyone want to put themselves in the state of indecision? There are many reasons why people do that. Why people want to have this emotional inability, this unwillingness to make a decision. Firstly, it's due to lack of information or knowledge, which can be initially a genuine difficulty as one studies to gain knowledge and can be clear about the matter. Secondly, it is due to laziness or stubbornness. They don't want to talk about it. It takes too much energy to think about it, to decide it, so just let it be. So they're just stuck. They're stuck. Thirdly, being indecisive can give themselves a sense of power. If in doing so, keep others waiting, their indecision tends to have the effect of making others anxious. So in a way, they gain control over other people by waiting and not making a decision. Fourthly, by being indecisive, no one can fault them if they make a mistake. If they haven't yet committed to anything, for instance, they may say, I've never committed to any precept, so I don't have to worry about violating the precepts. And then fifthly, spiritual confusion. One is unaware that there are any alternatives to choose from. One may think, for example, that all religions have the same truth as their goal, or that there is literally no difference between samsara and nirvana. 轮回跟涅槃没有差别，轮回và niết bàn không có sai biệt. And that one need not therefore distinguish between skillful and unskillful actions. 善跟恶没有差别，thiện và ác không có khác biệt. So in this way, they may avoid doubt and indecisions by remaining in a dark cloud of unawareness. Does it make sense? So they just don't want to make a decision because of their spiritual confusion. If, on the other hand, one is in the process of trying to understand more clearly, then this is obviously not a negative mental event. In Chinese, it's called 疑问 or nghi vấn in Vietnamese, meaning you have doubts, but because you lack information, you want to learn. So that kind of doubt is intellectual, which is not the same as a doubt of your inability to make a commitment. So how do we overcome this doubt? What can we do? Well, one way is to have clarity of thought. So how do we clarify our thinking? The whole spiritual life contributes to clarity of mind in some way. One can start out adopting skillful actions and observing the precepts, 造善业与持戒, 汉庭 và trì giới, such as the 5 precepts we just talked about: no killing living beings, no stealing what is not given, no sexual misconduct, and be faithful to one's partner, no lying, and no intoxication. So the idea is that as one sees the benefits of living a simple life and harmless life, one has no regret in whatever one does. So if you can say to yourself, I have done nothing wrong, it is a powerful emotion and a boost of self-esteem and self-confidence. When you have self-esteem, you appreciate the value you have. When you have self-confidence, you're able to show loving kindness to others without fear. Self-esteem and self-confidence generate joy and enthusiasm. So the more you commit yourself to the precepts, leading a skillful life, and you see the results of your practice, your self-esteem and confidence increase ever more. This helps to clarify one's thinking. So for those who are new to Buddhism, they will want to make sure exactly what it means to become a Buddhist in terms of their whole way of life. One doesn't want to make a big, perhaps a painful decision for the sake of something that is not going to stand up to rational scrutiny, or that it's going to be it's not going to produce happiness and joy in the long term, if not short term. So this sort of careful examination of the Dharma is not doubt and indecision, but clear thinking, right? You want to know what you're committing yourself to. When I decided to become a monk early this year, I went through a period of thinking it out, whether I would be able to sustain this kind of new way of life. I analyzed it from different perspectives, socially, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. I asked myself, can I live with this decision for the rest of my life and be happy about it? If I face obstacles to knock my hopes and dreams upside down, how would I feel about it? I went through a period of clear thinking and played out different scenarios to try to answer the question. Fortunately for me, the answers were affirmative. Therefore, I made the decisions to join the monastic order. It doesn't mean that I knew exactly what would happen. There are many unknowns in life, but not all unknowns are destined to be disasters. While there are uncertainties of what the future may bring, but one thing for sure, which is we have complete control over our current deeds. We can choose to give our life more skillfulness or more unskillfulness. 善业, right? 恶业, thiện nghiệp, ác nghiệp. Skillful deeds with skillful conditions will result in favorable results. So I reasoned with myself, my current life is fairly good and joyful. If I continue to live a skillful life, dedicating my life to the Buddhist teachings of loving kindness and selflessness, my future should not become worse, right? It would continue to be favorable. So I thought, there has never been a Buddhist, a monk. There has never been a monk who has been left to starve to death because he had no support. So the probability of me becoming monk and starve to death is pretty low. But the percentage of failing is high if one lacks seriousness and concentration in one's practice, right? If you just come and just once in a while you sit in meditation, once in a while you attend lectures, your chance of achieving enlightenment is, I would say, pretty low. May not be impossible, but it's pretty low. Does anybody play basketball right here? No? No? Okay. Yeah, Irene? Yeah. No. So I reasoned with myself, I may not be able to make 100% of the shots into the basket. But if I don't practice and try, I would not score any shots, right? So I have to give my dreams and aspiration a try, right? Nobody has ever been, like I said, no monk has ever been starved to death. So me, facing that situation, starvation is pretty low, I would say. I realized that one's doubt and indecision is one's own, and one has to make one's own decisions. Sometimes one way of clarifying one's doubt and or situation is to talk with an actual person, a spiritual friend, who will help one to clarify the issues. So I was fortunate enough to have my masters, my friend, to talk things through in addition to my own intuition. So another thing to help overcome indecision is to have faith, 信心, 等等. If one doesn't believe that it is possible to develop as an individual, then one won't be able to put that development of the energy that will enable one to develop. So if one is unsure about the value or effectiveness of meditation, for example, so that one does it with an attitude of just seeing how it will turn out, hoping something will come of practicing it, one probably won't get very far, right? You lack seriousness, you're not going to be very successful. So this is not clear thinking. It's just that one is not serious about it, right? If one is serious, one will give serious thoughts about one's practice. One cannot start off with no doubts whatsoever, but there must be at least some faith of the possible, right? We may not know what the future may bring, but we should have a faith in ourselves that we can achieve this. It is possible for us to be successful. One must have some degree of convictions sufficient to motivate one's practice, to produce the result tangible enough to confirm that one has made the right decision, right? So you practice and you see how your life has changed, how things have become more favorable, not easier, but favorable, with encouragement that you're on the right path, right? And you see how people around you treat you. You see the support you're receiving. When you need help, you receive help. So you may not have abundance of help with abundance of things, but if you observe and if you're on the right path, you will receive some form of help that is very necessary to your practice. So you know that you're on the right track, right? One principle that has enabled me to make decisions is the law of conditionality, 缘起法, 法缘可以, which says skillful deeds plus skillful conditions will produce joy and happiness. If I'm not committed to skillfulness, but I wish that good things will happen to me, then that is just delusion. 妄想, 妄得, right? So let's summarize what we have discussed and adjourned today. Are there any other comments? So we talked about two specific topics today. One was Moggallāna and his friends abandoning their distinguishing marks of clothing and hairstyle and enter the classless society of ascetics. And then we elaborated on the advantages and disadvantages of identity. Socially speaking, identity can help one feel safe and have a sense of belonging, where one may have a relatively joyful life. Spiritually speaking, from a Buddhist perspective, identity develops karmic tendency that binds us to the cycle of life and death, where one is subject to constant fluctuation of joy and suffering, and losing one's identity is fearful. So to help us make that transitions from identity to identitylessness, or from the mundane to the transcendental, there is a bridge of spiritual community. Spiritual community, 僧团, 当đoàn, is different from the group, 团体, đoàn thể. The group is governed by power and authority, whereas spiritual community is governed by loving kindness and selflessness. Spiritual community helps to develop individuals, with a capital I, who are self-aware without being egoistic, positive, and responsible for their own development. The second topic that we just discussed was Moggallāna and his friends studied under the ascetic teacher Samsara, but later realized that his philosophical stance was merely avoidance and skepticism. We talked about indecision, which is an emotional inability to make a commitment. It helps to have clarity in what we do and to talk to those who have been there, so to speak. It's important to understand the law of conditionality because it can really help you to reason things through. The future may be full of uncertainties, but one thing for sure is that we have complete control over our current deeds, our thinking, our speech, and our actions. Skillful deeds plus skillful conditions will result in favorable results.